of the our chairperson, honorable chairperson, director, deputy directors, and roots, and all the fraternity, all the staff of the CCRT, on behalf of the teachers, I take a privilege to welcome one of the junior fellowship given by Ministry of Culture that time earlier. Now it is a scheme which is implemented by the CCRT. So Rajesh sir conduct this lecture, sir. Thank you, Vananda sir. Please proceed, sir. Architecture and sculpture.
Okay. So today we have the first lecture on Indian architecture. So actually we are talking about art and architecture specifically in ancient India. So you may be wondering that why I have talked about this slide called art and architecture in medieval India. Actually, one of the basic problems is that when we talk about ancient India, we have most representatives of Hindu architecture in early medieval India. Early medieval India is also known as the period when we have a large number of temples. So when we talk about Indian architecture, what we are talking about is Buddhist architecture, and in Buddhist architecture, one of the component is the presence of the Buddha. So this is marked by three structures, that is the stupa, the chaitya, and the stupa, as I told you, is a reliquary structure. Reliquary means to keep the relics. Now the chaitya is a structure which is for worshipping. So chaitya is a small stupa. That is a stupa which is not for keeping the relics of holy men, but for worshipping. And now then we have the third structure. The third structure is a vihara. As I told you, the vihara, how did the vihara come? During the early period of Buddhism, monks used to travel from one place to the another, and then there was this problem of when we are traveling from one place to another, we are trampling on plants. After the rainy season, we have most of the seeds become new plants, young plants, and the plants are dying. Then there is a paradoxical situation that on one side you are preaching non-violence, and on the other side you are trampling on plants. Then how do you overcome this dichotomy? So this led actually to the whole idea of a question of how to practice non-violence, but at the same time being part of a monastic community. Therefore, this whole idea of a monastic community had to stay at one place. This staying of one place was known as Vihara. We have the Eastern India, which is one of the main centers of Buddhism. So today, if you see the term, two places were there. One was the place of Bangadesha and Magadha. So Bangadesha becomes your Bangadesha, and which becomes Bengal, because the letter Va becomes the letter Ba. The place where you had large number of viharas becomes Bihar. So today the modern Indian state of Bihar is known from the state of the viharas. Okay, now after this, what is happening is that we also have now the transition to a different patronage, that is the idea of merit accruing from patronage to the vihara. How does merit come? So merit comes when you actually do good karma. So most of the people were actually merchants or warriors, and the merchants actually patronize the vihara for the simple reason that they get religious merit or good karma, but it also served some practical purpose. These practical purposes that it served. The Sanchi Stupa is one of the most important stupas which is located on the trade routes. We have two trade routes in India, that is the Uttarapatha, which is connecting Sonargaon in Bengal to Lahore, which was the same trade route and which is known today as the Grand Trunk Road. So Sanchi Pass, which lay in the Dakshinapatha. The merchants patronize these stupas for the simple reason that when you patronize a stupa, you get not only religious merit, but people will not. Who are the people who will not attack the stupa? The bandits won't attack the stupa, because the bandits are a menace in these regions. So the merchants can have free movement, and this is also a place for resting, not only for them, for their entire caravans or sartavaha, and also for their animals. So now we have, after this important transition, so we have the three structures: the stupa, the second is the chaitya, the third is the vihara. The next section in Buddhism comes with the Mahavihara. So now the term Mahavihara is normally translated as a big vihara, which is slightly misleading. Actually, the term Mahavihara, when we talk, means a monastic university. In the Gupta and the post-Gupta period, we have a large number of sedentary communities. As I told you, in the Upanishadic period, we have the idea of the holy man who left everything and went away to the forest. As we all know, and we'll be talking about in the class on iconography, we have an image of the emaciated Buddha, the only image in which the Buddha is about to die and his bones are shown. So the Buddha realized the futility of staying in the forest, and therefore, what the Buddha did is he said that one should not indulge in self mortification or troubling the human body on one side. On the other side, one should also not indulge in extreme sensual pleasures. So now the Buddhist community, as I told you, that the stupa is a structure which is Guri structure. Then the Chaitya is a structure which is a votive structure, that is for prayer. And then the Vihara is a structure in which the people used to go to stay. And who are these people who used to stay? These were the monks and the nuns. The monks were known as the bhikkhus and they were part of the bhikkhu sangha. Then you have later period, that is in the 30 years after the establishment of Buddhism, we have Prajapati Gautami, the grand aunt of Buddha, asking for the entry of women into the Sangha, and this came to be known as the Bhikkhuni Sangha. Now, this particular idea of Ajanta Vihara led to models of Vihara in many different places. But as we know, and will be when we talk about temple architecture, we'll be talking, we do not have the same physical geography in all places of India. So, like for example, in Western India, we have good quality stones in the Western Ghats where Ajanta is located. In Northern India, we do not have good quality stone. So, all the viharas of Northern India are built using bricks, including the first vihara, that is in near Bodh Gaya. So, we have all these 8 places which become part of the sacred geography of Buddhism. Okay, so now the 8 sacred places associated with the life and events of the Buddha. The first, as you all know, is Lumbini, where the Buddha was born. The second was the place Bodh Gaya, where the Buddha attained enlightenment. The third is the place which is Sarnath, where the Buddha preached his first sermon and which is associated with what is known as the Dhammachakra Pavattana in Pali or Dharmachakra Pravartana in Sanskrit, known as the turning of the wheel of the law. Then after that, we have the next important place, that is Shravasti in Uttar Pradesh, present day Uttar Pradesh, which is the only place where the Buddha performed a miracle. Then we have Nalanda, we have Rajgir, and then we have Vaishali, and then finally the Buddha comes from here to Kushinagar. So it is in Kushinagar that we have the Mahaparinirvana or the final blowing out. So it is on this place we have the Rambar Stupa, which is the first stupa. So right now we talked about the 3 structures, the stupa, chaitya and the vihara. These are the 3 structures. I told you, the stupa of the reliquary, the chaitya, and then the vihara. So this stupa had a ceremonial gate known as the Torana. The Torana was there not only in the stupa but also in other associated structure like the palace or the prasada. Next please. So as I told you, the origin and functions of the stupa, it originated from the funerary tumuli, that is the bones of the people in North India who died and which was a part of the folk culture of North India prior to Buddhism. So after the, as I told you, the passing away of Lord Buddha in Kushinagar, that is a Mahaparinirvana, there was a debate on what should be done to his corporeal remains. So the corporeal remains were cremated and then the bones and the other tumuli were divided into 8 parts, which were then divided among the 8 great powers of North India. And so these powers, one of these parts was the encased in a stupa which is known as a Rambar Stupa, the first stupa in the Buddhist tradition. The method of worship was the circumambulation, that is from right in a clockwise direction. This is the slide of the Torana or the gateway. So you have the 3 what we call architraves. The 3 architraves which are known as the Thabas in Pali and Sanskrit, and then these 3 are penetrated by 3 needles known as the Suchi. But the stupa was one of the first stone structure. And then Ashoka, when he was the governor of Vidisha, is supposed to have enlarged the stupa. We have the railing or the Vedi. The railing or the Vedi is one of the structures in the stupa which gives the protection to the devotee from the outside. Means it is making a distinction between the sacred space on one side and then the ordinary space on the outside. So this is a layout of the Sanchi Stupa. So in this layout of Sanchi Stupa, you can see this is the Sanchi Stupa which is in the center, and then you also have what you call other stupas, but then there are other buildings. What are these other buildings? These are the buildings which actually have what we call the mercantile settlements and the quarters of the merchants. So these mercantile settlements and quarters now help the merchants to stay near the stupa, also patronize the stupa. Like the stupa, now we have the chaitya, which is a prayer hall, and so this is a prayer hall which is like a small stupa, that is a votive stupa. So the stupa was a reliquary, this is a votive structure. So this is the stupa at Chaitya at Karle. Now you see the devotees, they'll go from here from the right side and come from the left side. That is, you have to travel in a clockwise fashion, that is circumambulate. So this is the stupa in Nepal which is known as the Bodhnath stupa. So this stupa actually is slightly different from the other stupas, because unlike the early Indian stupas, you have the anda which is not very round, and also you have the Harmika, and then you have the Chatraveli is slightly different, and then you have two eyes on the Harmika. So this is the Nepalese style of stupa. Then the Vihara. The Vihara means a place to stay, as we were discussing. So we have many Viharas in Bihar, and that is how the name Bihar comes. So all the Viharas had a similar plan. So then we have the Ajanta Vihara. There was an entrance to the Vihara, and then you have a prayer hall. Then there were cells on different sides for the monks to reside. You can see the Vihara which is on the side, that is, you have the caves which are scooped out from the stone. So these are the caves which are scooped out from the stone, from the rock.
Hello?
This is the important slide. This shows the transition from the Vihara to the Mahavihara. The Mahavihara means not only a big Vihara but a monastic university. So the idea of a monastic university is that you have more patronage. A large number of monks who stayed in one place now started actually reading and writing and produced literature. So there were two important subjects in which they started doing research on. One was philosophy and the other was linguistics and language. So therefore the Mahavihara becomes a monastic university. Now this is a Nalanda Mahavihara. So there are only some parts of this Nalanda Mahavihara because most of these were destroyed during the Turkish invasion. We have a record of this in the history of Buddhism in India and Tibet by the Tibetan Lamas who are witness to this. The last abbot or Acharya, Mahacharya was Shakyasri Bhadra. Yeah, this is the early Hindu temple. We have a side of the Hindu temple. So now when we say the Hindu temple, we have the earliest examples of Hindu temple coming only from the Gupta period. Means in structures. Before that, we do not have many examples for the simple reason that the earlier forms of worship did not follow the Puranic religion, but they followed the practice of Homa and also different practices like worshipping sacred trees, worshipping bowers, etc. etc. The temple is actually modeled on the palace. So the term for palace in Sanskrit is also the prasada. So the palace of whom? It was a palace of Indra. So in Devaloka. So the idea of the Hindu temple comes from the idea of the palace in Devaloka, which is a palace of Indra, the king of the gods. Now these are the two important, unlike the structures in the Buddhist architecture, the important structures of the temple are two. This is the fully developed Shikara. So you have the Garbhagriha and the Shikara, which is on the top. We have different styles of Shikara, which differentiate the different styles of the temples. Next, please. Yeah, so now this is a clear idea of an evolved temple. So when you go first, what you have, Garbhagriha. On top you have the Vimana, and on the topmost you have the Amlaka. Amlaka is a gooseberry where you have the Kalasha. So this shows that the consecration is already done. So these are the parts of temple, and they are modeled on certain features, which we'll see. Yeah, these are the two styles of the temple. We are seeing the shikaras on the left. These are both from North Karnataka. North Karnataka is the only place where you have both the styles in one place. That is a Mallikarjuna temple. And here you see on the left side you have the temple which has a shikara which is like a onion, which is sloping inwards. This is known as a Nagara style of temple. On the right side you have a shikara which is actually like a pyramid. That is the Dravida style of shikara which is there in South India. This is a Lakshmana temple. The main difference is that this temple is built on a big platform. The platform is known as the Jagati. Yeah, these are the walls. So the earlier temples, the walls were all empty, but later what happens in the temple is that we have actually many walls which are not empty but which are used for showing certain sculptures. These sculptures show some stories. And in this case of Khajuraho, we have certain erotic sculptures because this was part of one of the most important aspects of Indian tradition. So these structures came to be known as sexual or erotic only after the British came in 18th century. The pre-modern Indians did not consider this as something which was vulgar. So this is the Konark temple. The Konark is one of the important temples in Orissa, and this is also one of the important, the earlier temple in that it is part of the sun worship. And then we have the one structure is known as the Deul and the Jagan Mohana. So these are like the two structures which are a place where you have the shrine and also the Mantapa. Mantapa is a place where the devotees are congregating. Yeah, this is one of the temples within the fort. So temples are there in different geographical locations, so they use different structures. This, as I told you, is the Mallikarjuna temple which we had seen. Here we had two temples in this complex. One is having a Dravida Shikara and one is having a Nagara Shikara. So this is having the Dravida Shikara. The earlier one we had shown was having a Nagara Shikara. That is a northern style. This is actually a first. So we have three main steps in the temple construction. First is the cave temples, the second is a rock cut temple, and the third is a structural temple. So this is known as Arjuna's penance, and this is the first example of a cave temple. So we have a cave temple in Mamallapuram or Mahabalipuram, which was built during the time of the Pallavas. So this is a temple which can be built where there are caves and you just scoop out something from the caves. This is the example of Ellora. Ellora is an example of a rock cut temple. In the rock cut temple, what happens is that you have a temple which is actually made of a single rock. So you have to cut the rock from top to bottom. There are very few rock cut temples and rock cut structures in the world. One is the structure of the famous rock cut temple in Ethiopia, which is known as the Black Jerusalem, built by Lalibela. Another example of a rock cut temple known as the Seven Rathas. So we also saw the cave temple in Mamallapuram. These seven rathas are there. These are also there in Mamallapuram or known as Mahabalipuram in Tamil Nadu, which was the capital, one of the important cities of the Pallavas near Kanchipuram. The shore temple becomes a model for the largest number of temples in India. Simple reason that the shore temple is actually built of many different stones which are joined together. So unlike the cave temples where you can build only where there are caves, or the rock cut temples which you can build only where there are rocks, the shore temple can be built anywhere. Yeah, this is the largest temple in India in terms of size. So after the Pallavas, we have the rise of the Cholas. The Cholas were the most important dynasty because they ruled for the longest period in India. This is also another image of a Tamil temple. So we have now the different styles of temples. Now our question is, we have the temple and the temple car. Now, why are the temple cars there? And why these can be explained by two important situations. What is the function of the devotee? So, when a devotee goes to the temple, there are four functions of the devotee. The first is he does not say, I am going to the temple. He says that I am going to have a darshana. Darshana. The second duty is the circumambulation or pradakshina. The third duty is to take the prasada, and the fourth duty is to ritually leave the temple. So these are the four duties of the devotee. Now after this, what happens with the king? When does the temple start? The function of the temple starts early in the morning at around 4:30 in the Brahma Muhurtam. So in the Brahma Muhurat, when the temple starts, we have the ritual music which is played. So after the ritual music is played, the temple is again closed. So similarly, when the ritual music is played, then we also have the king in the palace who is woken up with music. Then the god takes rest, and we have his bath and then new clothes being worn. The king also takes bath and he has new clothes. Then after which the door is closed and then again it is open. Then the puja is done. The devotee god eats. The king also eats. Then the temple is also closed. The deity also sleeps. So this in short is the structure of the temple. So Indian art is spread over the subcontinent. So when we say subcontinent, like Indian iconography and Indian architecture, we have some same style all over India, from North India to South India. These cultures which are known as Indian. So what is it that makes this Indian? That is a whole question. These cultures are known as Indian because they have certain qualities. So now we'll be trying to understand what is a general style by which we can see all the sculptures and structures have. In the case of structures, we have seen that the stupa is round, the temple is square, the temple has a garbhagriha, and the temple has a vimana. So same is the case with the sculpture. We have students. Now, when we say the sculpture, like in the case of architecture, most of the temples are built of stone, and in case of North India, now the Britishers came to India, and some of the travel writers wrote about Indian art. Now, in the traditional Buddhist idea, we have 5 mudras. Totally in India, we have many different mudras, which will come to later. So these are the. So this I'm giving you an example, which will be coming to later. This is the earliest of the structures, which is known as the Harappan dancing girl, which is found in Mohenjo-daro. This is an example of the earliest evidence of iconography in India. Next slide, please. That is, as this slide explains, in Indus Valley civilization, we have the early slides, but these slides were actually made by mud, that is terracotta, and also there were toys among these slides, but very few have survived. This is also a statue of an elephant, which is again part of the Indus Valley. So this is again made of mud. It is more than 3,500 years old, and it has survived. We come to the Maurya period. The Maurya period is the first important period in the Indian sculpture. So during the period of Ashoka, we have a very large number of icons made. So today, if you see the national symbol of India, the symbol of India is the Ashoka Chakra, and also the 3 lions. The 4 lions actually, one cannot be seen. These 4 lions are taken from the symbol of the Ashokan pillars. We have a turning point, one of the most important changes in Indian iconography. As we had seen in the case of sculpture, we talked about the Buddhist sculpture, and then we went on to look at the temple sculpture. So similarly, we had seen that the presence of the Buddha and the Mahavira was not shown. The Buddha was shown by showing the Buddha Pada. Similarly, he was also represented by the empty throne. Now, in Gandhara, we have 2 schools. During the Kushana period, we have a school known as the Gandhara school that was in northwestern India, and another school of sculpture known as the Mathura school. So we have in the Gandhara school a turning point. This is again the Buddha Pada. The Buddha Pada is having chakras. The Buddha Pada is having flowers, etc. It is having many different lakshanas. This is a plain Buddha Pada. Plain means it is just empty. So during this period, we also have the Buddha is not shown in human form, but we have other subjects. The other subjects are the yakshas and the yakshis. So this is one of the yakshis which is shown. Yakshis are not human beings. Yakshis are not gods. The next slide shows the image of the Buddha. This is one of the earliest statues of the Buddha, and this is very, very important because we have earlier only the representation of the Buddha in the form of the Buddha Pada or the footprints of the Buddha or the throne of the Buddha or the empty throne. Instead of showing the Buddha, the Emperor Kanishka starts representing the image of the Bodhisattva. So this is actually the people were worshipping the Chaitya. Now they are also started to worship the image of the what we call the Buddha. The next important period starts during the period of the Guptas, when we have the rise of the Puranic religions, and we have many stories from mythology. Chola temple, that is the temple of Brihadishvara. Outside you can see the sculpture of Nandi, the bull, which is the Vahana of Shiva. Okay, now we have so therefore by the early medieval period we have the golden age of Indian iconography, which is not in the ancient period because you do not have many sculptures in the ancient period. Yeah, now we return again to the whole story of how these statues came of the Buddha. So we started with the 1st century AD, in which we have the Buddha statues which were installed by Kanishka. The Emperor Kanishka installed the statue of what we call the Bodhisattva, and then later the Buddha. The first important theme in Buddhist iconography was the dream of the Queen Maya. Queen Maya, as you all know, is the mother of the Buddha. So she has a dream in which the birth of the Buddha is there. And please see that this is a marble sculpture which is made from Nagarjunakonda. We have the three main traditions, that is Barbut and Mathura. Then the Amravati school is modeled on Nagarjunakonda. So this is one of the important stories. Second is the Buddha being assaulted by Mara. Mara is supposed to be the devil. And now the Buddha is on his way to enlightenment, and Mara promises him all pleasures of life, which the Buddha refuses to accept. So this is the representation in the Gandhara style. This slide shows you the relationship between architecture and sculpture. So by the 10th century onward, we cannot study sculpture separately, but we have to study it along with architecture. That is where the sculpture is located. Is it located in the temple or is it located in the Buddha? Next, please. Here again, the birth of the Buddha is shown, and we have the Yakshis, and again this is shown in the Greek style, which clearly gives you an indication that this is the Gandhara style. And now we have the important elements, that is the Ushnisha. This is another important theme in Buddhist iconography. This shows the great departure of the Buddha. The great departure is the Buddha living his life as a prince to become a renunciate. This is a slide which shows the emaciated Buddha. So the Buddha, as we know, practiced many different. One of the type of meditation was to actually self-mortification or troubling of the body, in which the Buddha wanted to take the body to a different level by experiencing acute pain. This is the mudra in which the Buddha holds his two hands which are folded together. This is known as the Dhyani Mudra. It means the Buddha is engaged in meditation. These are the Buddhist symbols on the iconography. On the top is a lotus, and then you have the wheel, and then on the third you have the stupa, which is there in the Tibetan tradition known as the Chorten, and then you have the deer, because the first the lecture was delivered in the deer park. The snake is not popular in northern Buddhism, but more popular in Southeast Asia because it is associated with the pre-Buddhist rituals, and it also gives protection to the Buddha, which is known as the famous Muchalinda snake. Okay, we come to the most important part of the lecture, that is whether it is Buddhist iconography or whether it is Indian iconography. The most important part are the mudras. So the first mudra we see is the Abhaya mudra. Second is the Dharmachakra Pravartana or the Dhammachakra Pravartana, in which the two hands are joined together to show the turning of the wheel of the law. The third is the Vitarka mudra, which is the explanation. And the fourth is the Varada, or giving of the boons. And the fifth is the most important, which is on the topmost, that is the Abhaya. Abhaya means, Bhaya means fear, Abhaya means fear not. So the Buddha is showing the mudra of fear not. He is giving you the idea of protection. So we have totally around 3,300 mudras in the Indian tradition, and these are some of the 5 important mudras. Now you have this next statue, which is very clearly different from the earlier statue because this is very thin. This statue is very thin. This follows the Mathura style, unlike the Gandhara style, which you have heavy Buddhas. So this actually is a full-bodied figure, and now the garments are also very different. It is more of an Indian style. This is the Chinese Buddha of the Tang dynasty, where you have the shoulders are very broad and then the waist is narrow. Yeah, we have the early Buddha statues. So if you see the early Buddha statues, these are actually Bodhisattva statues. They are all in the Abhaya Mudra, and he stands behind the image to show that he is the patron behind the protector. So therefore, we have this particular theme: Buddha icons at Mathura. So here we have the Buddha icons at Mathura. If you see the hand is showing you the gesture of the Abhaya Mudra or fear not. And the Buddha is engaging, the eyes are open. Yeah, from this statue, we can clearly know from these two statues that the Roman influence is there, particularly in the necklace, the treatment of hair, the treatment of nose, then the dresses, etc. Yeah, this statue is very important because now we have the idea of who is the holy man. So the holy man is having a halo over his head. So if you see the Buddha now is having a halo over his head. This is one of the more important slides because if you see compared to the earlier slide of the Buddhas, what is happening to this Buddha is that the earlier Buddha was actually engaging with the world. Now with the development of Buddhist iconography, we have the transition to the temple iconography, which starts during the period of the Guptas. The early icons of Vishnu and Shiva. So these are the early icons of Vishnu and Shiva. So with these icons become popular by the 4th and the 5th century AD because we have the rise of the Puranic religions. The Puranas are the religious traditions based on the Puranas, and therefore they are actually projecting the main deities of Vishnu and Shiva. So these early styles for addition. So now all the deities have certain features. These features are known as what we call certain mudras are there. Then they also have certain weapons known as ayuda, and then they also have animals known as vahanas, and they are in certain pose. This is the image of the Shiva temple in Ellora, which is a rock cut temple. So we have the icons part of the main mother rock. We have the image of Vishnu, the boar incarnation, and Shiva holding the demon Ravana in Vijayanagara Mahabharata battle in the temple columns. So the entire walls of the temple show the armies. So by the early medieval period, we have two types of slide, two types of icons. One is we have the icons of many of the deities, and then we also have the icons of the saints. This slide was showing you the idea of the marble icon, which is from Western India. This slide shows you an icon which is the sculpture is from Eastern India because it is very clearly what we call flat and the use of black sandstone. So on top you have the attendant deities. So you have the angels, you have the attendant deities which are on the top if you can see. So this is again the example of a religious pantheon. So here in this we have the god, the deity, and then we also have the kinnaras, and we have the other demigods, and they are shown in the 3.5 talas, whereas the main deity is shown in the Navatala or the 9 span. So this is again from Eastern India. So here we have the icon of Vishnu. Next is metal sculptures. So metal sculptures were made in large numbers during the Chola period, and we have bronzes made during the Pala period. Next slide please. During the Pala period and the Chola period. So the metal sculptures are predominantly showing themes taken from the Puranas again. So in the medieval period, we have the deities which are shown with more profusion of hands to invest them with more power. So here you have Durga with the image of the Mahishasura Mardini, and also Durga trampling on the demons. So here we have two sculptures. One is of Ganesh made in stone, and on the right side we have a statue which is made of bronze. Now the problem with copper and bronze is that we have the green patina forming, so there is a need for regular upkeep. So the stone statues are kept for regular worship in the temple and known as the Anugraha Murti. and these metal statues are taken in procession and they are known as the Utsav Murti. The next slide again shows you the statue of the Buddha. Now here you have the body which is in the 9 talas, and so in this statue, yeah, here we have the halo behind the head, which is there both. As we started the lecture, we said that both in Hindu and Buddhist tradition, we have the similar type of ideas, and then we also have mudras which are also shared by all these traditions. And more importantly, the division of the body into 9 talas or the 9 Spanish. This is the famous same architectural language, iconographic language. Now you see this slide, there are 4 or 5 important features. The first most striking feature is that the Buddha here is very thin and very slender compared to the Gandhara Buddha. So this is one of the hallmarks of the Mathura Buddha, Mathura school of sculpture, which is supposed to be the best. Second thing is that the use of red sandstone, which is a very malleable form. The third and most important feature is that the Buddha's eyes are looking inward. That is, the Buddha is engaged not with the outside world, but with conquering his own mind. So now the subject matter, the idea behind the image, and then the treatment, all these are executed in unison only in the Mathura Buddha. So therefore, this is supposed to be the best. Now,
And on behalf of CCRT and on behalf of Roots and Roots to Roots, really I appreciate their efforts. We thank. Please have a safe home or safe school. Take the precautionary measures, guidelines given by the government. Thank you one and all. So we finish this. Thank you. Thanks once again for all.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.